So we're going to be working on Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 through 26. I've thought 3 times now that each time I work on this text that it would be our last lesson on the fruit of the Spirit. And this is not necessarily on the fruit of the Spirit, but I did want to finish up the text. So Galatians 5, verse 22 through 26. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And they that are Christ have crucified the flesh with the affections and lust. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not be desirous of vainglory, provoking one another, envying one another. When we began this passage, we talked about growth, how no matter how old you are or how young you are, you should be growing. And I think people are often confused. They think that we can cease growing, that we can reach a level of competence that has been acquired, and that we can just stop and stay there. I can't speak for the field that you worked in, but for many, many, many fields, whether it's law enforcement, cooking, the medical fields, or one of the trades like plumbing, electrical, or mechanics, they all know that the minute you stop learning, the minute that you stop thinking about the new things that are coming out in your trade, your job, you might hang on to your job for a while, but the moment you stop learning, you don't get to stay where you are. You begin regressing and moving backwards, and it's the same with spiritual things. The moment we stop walking with the Lord, the moment we stop growing, we don't get to stay where we are. We begin losing ground immediately, and you would be surprised at how quickly you can lose ground. And we talked about how these fruits should be evident in the life of every believer. We might lack in this particular fruit or that particular fruit, but it's important to note it's not our job to produce the fruit. It's our job to walk in the Spirit, to obey the things that we know to obey. And when we're walking in the Spirit, it's His job to then produce those fruits. Then we took a detour and we talked about the greatest challenge that any of us will face. The challenge that is a life that proves we believe God is what God said He is in the Bible. And I want you to think about that for a minute. See, it's very easy for a person to say, I believe in God. We could go to an atheist, and an atheist could make the statement, I believe in God. We know the devils believe and they tremble. But there's a difference between saying that you believe something and then actually living a life that proves that belief. We can say things like we know where, we could say, I believe where God guides, God provides. Or we could say, I believe God can do anything. Or we could say, I believe God is all powerful. But actually ordering our life in such a way that if we were brought into court and our faith put on trial, that there would be evidence that we don't just say that thing, but that we actually believe that God can do anything, and we have evidence of our life that prove it. That they could list time and time again where we chose to trust the Lord, where we chose to lean on His promises and not to lean on our own understanding or the logic of man. Where we stepped out, so to speak, into the Red Sea, and as we stepped out, there was water underneath our foot. But by the time our foot hit the ground, it was dry land. Then we wrapped up with our fruits of the Spirit, and now I want to look at the last few verses here. And they that are Christ's have crucified the flesh with the affections and lusts. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not be desirous of vainglory, provoking one another, envying one another. It says, and they that are Christ's. I want to park here for a second. The first question I have to ask, of course, is, are you Christ's? And there are a lot of things that I'm going to say tonight. I'm going to be honest with you. I know who I'm talking to. I'm talking to the Wednesday night crowd. I'm talking to the faithful people who came here in a thunderstorm. And some of these things that we're going to talk about might seem like a duh. But as we discussed even at the beginning of this lesson, it doesn't matter where you are with your walk in the Lord. We can always move closer. And one of the things that I have to do for camp is I have to prepare missionary lessons. And I was very undecided, particularly this year, who it was I was going to talk about. So I started reading the diary of David Brainerd, and that always is greatly convicting to me. And then I read a condensed version of the life of David Goforth, and that had an impact on me. But that wasn't what God wanted me to talk about either. And then I read the life of David Livingston, and that had an impact on me. You say, why are you bringing this up? Because when I compare even the most spiritual folks I know to one of those folks, when I compare myself to those folks, I fall woefully short. And to be honest with you, I was questioning as I was thinking about this today, and you could mull this over, and maybe if you have a thought, you can talk with me later. We read those great stories about great missionaries, and I take absolutely nothing away from them. I wonder maybe sometimes if we romanticize a little bit, but also, like, for instance, when we read David Brainerd, it's his diary. There's nothing to romanticize. He's just recording life. Like, you can't romanticize that. But I say that because I would pose the question, right? We could list men from different eras, at least to some extent, but it would seem like, is there anyone recently who there could be a book written about the great things that God has used them to do? And I don't mean that as an insult. Maybe there is, and I don't know them. Maybe there's a book written literally last year about a missionary who God used in an amazing way, and I'm just not familiar with it. And maybe sometimes those things take time. But I point that out again for us to reflect, not on other people, but to reflect on us. Am I doing something, and I don't, again, mean this in a prideful way, right? Because David Livingstone none of the great missionaries ever thought there would be a book written about them. They were just serving God. But am I living such a life that if somebody wanted to write a book based on my life, that people would be able to dissect my life and go, wow, like that guy was really on fire for God? Or is the reason why we don't have any books, again, that I know of, written in recent years because we've all just become so lukewarm, we're not willing to make those sacrifices? I mean, look at the Goforths, if I remember right, lost everything they owned 4 times. Livingston buried his wife on the field. The Goforths buried several kids on the field. William Carey buried several kids on the field. Think of the sacrifices that these men made, and then I look at my own life, and I can't help but be embarrassed. So as we look at these things that we're going to look at tonight, please don't misunderstand. I know my audience, but I also know my audience is woefully short of what they could be, even though, so to speak, you're the cream of the crop, if that makes sense. So, they that are Christ, the question is, are you Christ? Have you really been John 3:3 born again, not of corruptible seed, but of incorruptible? Are the old things passing away and all things becoming new? And you probably say, yeah, duh. Of course I'm born again or I wouldn't be here tonight. Well, then I have to ask you, is it evident in your life? If you belong to Christ, is it obvious that you belong to Christ? What I mean is 1 Corinthians 6:16 through 20. Verses you're very familiar with. What, know ye not that he which is joined to a harlot is one body? For two, saith he, shall be one flesh. But he that is joined unto the Lord is one spirit. Flee fornication. Every sin that a man doth commit without the body is without the body. But he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body. What? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own? For ye are bought with a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. We'll look at verse 17 for a second. But he that is joined unto the Lord is one spirit. When a believer is saved, we become spiritually united with Christ. Not blended, not absorbed, but joined, bonded, made of one purpose, one direction, in one nature, one spiritual life. When I was in college, I worked general maintenance, which, trust me, is not glamorous. I thought, because you have to fill out this work application, right? And you guys know my work history to some extent. I worked with Grandpa tearing out wallpaper and doing some drywall. Not that I'm not a master, but I mean, I worked on a NASCAR team. I worked as a mechanic. Like, I had some experience. So I'm filling all of this out, all of the things that I could do with some level of reasonable competency, and they hire me for general maintenance. So I think I'm going to be doing those sorts of things, like fixing a leaky sink or, stuff like that. And what was I doing? Well, they would use 12 young, strapping college students to do the work of one piece of equipment. So we were really just general labor would have been a better title for us than maintenance, because we didn't maintain much of anything. Now, if they needed a hole dug, like to fix a fence, or that was what general maintenance did. But I say, we worked general maintenance. And when I was in college working general maintenance, I worked with a plethora, probably 25 or 30 of us worked a shift at any given time. But I made 3 friends from working general maintenance. Piper, who is my friend to this day, he's my buddy in Virginia. Famay, who is a major in the United States Marine Corps, and he was actually here for my wedding. Some of you got to meet him, though you probably don't remember because it was moons ago. And my wife's cousin, Richard. But we worked together, and later on, Fame and I would work together frequently in junkyards and other places. And though we were different people, we had a similar spirit. We didn't have to tell each other kind of what we were going to do. We just did those things. And it was years after that I was working with Fame in the backyard doing something ignorant, I'm sure, probably working on an old truck that didn't need worked on. We call it restoration, okay? But he said, Mowers, it's a privilege to work with you. And I was like, I don't understand. He's like, well, I was just working with so-and-so. And I was like, okay. He's like, I had to stop and tell them what to do, everything to do, how to move, where to stand, what to do. And I just threw a ratchet strap at your head and you caught it and hooked it on the trailer so that we can do what needed done. We have the same spirit, right? We're working together and we do communicate when needed, but we're just of that ilk. We have a similar thing. And if you say you belong to Christ, you should have the same spirit that Christ has. Well, what spirit does Christ have? I mean, if you're saved, yes, positionally you do have the Holy Spirit, but do you like the same things that Jesus liked? You say, well, what did Jesus like? Valid question. If I were going to try and make a short list off the top of my head, we have recorded several times that he prayed. We obviously know that he taught publicly a whole lot, and I would argue for helping people. I'm sure there are more things we could add to the list, but if we were trying, I think those have to be pretty high up there on our list. So I would pose the question, how much of your week was spent then doing those things? If you're Christ's and you like the same things that Christ likes, are there times this week where you've chosen to separate yourself and get alone with God? How often have you spent time this week alone in prayer and the Word? How often have you spent time this week helping people? And again, I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know many of you have been doing these things since before I was in diapers. But maybe you've been slacking a little bit, or maybe you can ratchet it up to the next level. If we have the same spirit as Jesus, we should like the things that he liked, and we should also dislike the things that Jesus would dislike. Verse 17 from 1 Corinthians 6, but he that is joined unto the Lord is one spirit. Flee fornication. Every sin that a man doeth is without the body, but he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body. What? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own, for ye are bought with a price? Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. Again, we have been bought with a price. You remember from Sunday how we talked about how we are cheap throwaway, oftentimes broken containers, those jars of clay, those clay pots, that earthen vessel, but we were bought with a price. And yet how often do we, as vessels that have been bought with a price, walk around as if we own this thing? Imagine, to me it's a lot like leasing a car. You don't own that leased vehicle. The car dealership owns it. And if you don't take care of that lease, when it comes time for you to bring that vehicle back into the dealership, it's not going to go well. You get to drive that thing around for a while, and while you're driving, you can do whatever you want with it. Nobody's going to follow you around and tell you you probably shouldn't do that. You can lease a Ford Raptor, and you can take that baby out mudding. You can jump that thing and see how high it'll go. Nobody's going to stand there and say, don't do that. You could lease a Ford Mustang, and you can take that thing to the track and see what this thing will do. But guess what? You're going to have to turn it in. And when you turn it in, it's going to come to somebody like me. And I'm going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, because if I miss something, they're going to say, hey, Steve, the motor fell out of this car, buddy. How'd you miss that? So I'm going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and I'm going to note the things that are normal wear and tear. And I'm going to note the things that are excessive damage due to abuse. There's going to be a day of accounting. There's going to be a day of reckoning, and we will give an account for the things that are done in our body. Again, you guys know 2 Corinthians 5:10, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in his body according that he hath done, whether it be good or bad. Spurgeon remarked on this, that this verse means no secret will remain hidden, and every Christian must live with the awareness that Christ will examine our inner life. A.W. Tozer said, this is the believer's ultimate accountability, the moment when the mask falls off and the truth is revealed. We do a reasonable job, I think, of keeping certain things to ourselves.
But there will be a day that comes when all of the masks are off, when all of the walls are down, and our truth, the truth of our life will be revealed. You want to know what keeps me up at night? Oh, maybe you don't. But it isn't Hochul's unconstitutional gun laws. It isn't worrying about the economy. It isn't Muslim terrorist sleeper cells. It isn't the poor health care of New York. It isn't the thought that I might die. The thing that keeps me up at night, when anything keeps me up at night, is knowing that I'll stand before Jesus and give an account. It's knowing the times that I've fallen flat on my face in sin and utter disgrace. It's knowing the times that I should have witnessed to someone and I didn't. And I know after the judgment the tears will be wiped away. But I shudder to think, when our works are tried, yet so as by fire, how little, if anything, will remain. But when I think about that, I realize there are two key factors that are important. And number one is this: I'm not dead yet. Which means that if I'm not dead, I can still do my best to do the things we're talking about tonight. I can still do my best to crucify the flesh and to walk in the Spirit. The second thing is somewhere in my notes, apparently. I'm just going to move forward. And I read as we were talking about in reading David Brainerd's diary, I read it, and he's in the cold, he's in pain, he's coughing up blood. And one of the times that he was in that situation, he mentioned how in the past he would dream of owning a home with a warm fire. And this is what he said, again in his own words. He's in the cold, he's bleeding, of tuberculosis, he's coughing up blood. He's literally dying the slow way. And at one point he would dream of a home with a fire. And he said the Lord took those fleshly desires away from him. Think on that for a minute. Those are things that each of us have. And let's be honest, not only do we have a warm home, we take them for granted. Those were things that he gave up, and felt that daydreaming about those things for him was carnal. I posed the question, what sort of things in this life slow you down from serving God? What is it that your flesh lusts after, that your flesh craves? And note, having a house was not and is not sinful. Even the most strict of Puritans would not have condemned home ownership. Wanting to be warm is not sinful. But I think if David Brainerd were here with us today, he would say, it's sinful to want warmth if God has called you to the cold. It's sinful to want a house if God has called you to live in a teepee or a tent. Reminds me of the song, a tent or a cottage, why should I care? They're building a mansion for me over there. And yet, we do care. We care about foolish things while souls go to hell. As Paul closed chapter 5, he gives us two options of walking in the Spirit or walking in the flesh. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not be desirous of vainglory, provoking one another, envying one another. It's the same thing that he said essentially to the church at Philippi. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness to mind, let each esteem other better than themselves. I find it interesting that at least it's recorded for us here, the same problem in two different churches. Vainglory means empty pride, a hunger for recognition or applause of self. And it's insane to think that we, in the house of God, seek to be praised, seek to be accredited, to receive rank for the good things that we've done. And here's the thing. We all fall into this trap, I think, and it doesn't require any negative intent on our part. Look, as human beings, we're comparative. We look at, it doesn't matter what we're doing, especially I think men may be the worst at this, right? If we got two guys and one runs to his car, the other one's going to see if he can run to the car faster or whatever the thing is. We're just comparative human beings. And in being comparative human beings, we fall into this trap of seeking vainglory. Well, if they played the piano this time, then I want to play it that time. And if they did this good, then I want to do better. Or if he, this used to frustrate me. I'm going to be real with you again. Warning. They're used to, in the South, I have heard of them having, this is literally what they had, they would post it in the preaching competitions. And someone would win a preaching competition. You're breeding strife amongst preachers, saying this one is better than that one. And here's the thing. What are we using to judge? Who are we to judge who's the best? You guys know as well as I do Jonathan Edwards' famous sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. It said that he read it from a script in a monotone voice. And yet, thousands of souls were saved. So how in the world can we tell who the best preacher is? But that's what we do. We seek. And of course, if I'm in the competition, as Paul says, I say, if we're running a race, I'm going to win. So get out of the way. But that's how even those who have a sincere desire to serve God can accidentally fall into vainglory, seeking to have some level of recognition. Remember, it's what the apostles did. Who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom? And you remember, Jesus never criticized them wanting to be the greatest. He just said, you guys got it confused. Your definition of greatest isn't right. You're thinking like the world thinks. If you want to be great in my kingdom, then go get you a cloth and be a servant. If we belong to Christ, the world should be able to tell that we belong to Christ without us ever opening our mouth. We shouldn't have to say we're saved. They should tell that we're saved because our flesh is crucified, because the life that we live is led by the Spirit, because our hearts are free from the hunger of vainglory. As we look at these verses from Paul, he's not giving us a theory. He's giving us a mirror. He shows us what a Spirit-filled life looks like when fruit is real, when flesh is nailed down, when our walk matches our talk, and when the church stops competing and starts serving. So the question that matters, does your life look like someone who is Christ's, or does your life look like someone who is still their own? If you're Christ's, then crucify the thing that is killing you, your flesh. If you're Christ's, then walk where the Spirit leads. If you're Christ's, then drop the vainglory, the comparison, the quiet competition, and the need to be noticed. Because the believer who is crucified with Christ doesn't need applause. The believer needs obedience. A believer who walks in the Spirit doesn't need recognition. They need surrender. A believer who knows they'll stand before Jesus doesn't waste their life casting shadows. So let's lay down what the flesh loves and pick up what the Spirit produces. Let's walk out of here like we actually belong to Christ. If we live in the Spirit, then let's keep walking in the Spirit. Let's keep our flesh, our will, and our desires on the cross. And let's do a better job each day of allowing Christ to live through us.